Many of you know I went to Duke University for my undergraduate degree. To survive at Duke, you had to be driven and at least a teeny bit competitive. And so it wasn't surprising that my senior year, most of my friends were either applying to some sort of graduate school, generally business or law or medical school, or they were interviewing for jobs in investment banking with high-level firms based in places like New York City or Chicago. Me? I was interviewing for positions as an AmeriCorps volunteer and was thrilled beyond belief when I was offered a position in South Central Los Angeles. As you can probably imagine, I received many confused, baffled even looks from my friends and my professors when they heard this news. But there's a poem by Robert Frost that has stuck with me ever since I was introduced to it in 10th grade English class. And in the face of much pressure to do something different, as I began to question my decision, the words of this poem sustained me. It's going to be pretty familiar to you all. The poem is The Road Not Taken. And it begins with a person facing the decision about which direction to take when the road diverges into two. And the last stanza of the poem is what sustained my courage. I shall be telling with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Making choices that make all the difference. That is what I see going on in Mark's gospel today. Bartimaeus is a blind beggar. He is known to the community in Jericho. He is Timaeus' son. And because he is blind, there's not much that he has been able to do to provide for himself. And so he is at the mercy of that community to take care of him, give him food to eat, and possibly clothes to wear. And we know that they would have likely done this, perhaps out of compassion, but certainly because it was required under Jewish law. But as a blind man, Bartimaeus perhaps feels like he has not been a fully engaged person. He has not been able to do much else other than day in and day out seek to sustain his life. And so he calls out to this man, Jesus. He hasn't seen any of the miracles, and he certainly hasn't heard Jesus' teaching firsthand. But it's very likely that people have been talking around town as they walk past Bartimaeus about this man, Jesus, who has come to preach in Jericho. And they talk about what he is saying and doing. And Bartimaeus, in his blindness, sees. He sees the divinity of Jesus. And he calls out in faith, asking for what he desperately needs. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And his community, the people gathered out in the road to see Jesus, that community dismisses him, saying, "Oh, that's just blind Bartimaeus." "Shh, Bartimaeus, hush. Don't let him bother you, Jesus. Go on." And they move themselves in front of Bartimaeus, blocking the way to Jesus. But Bartimaeus persists. "Son Son of David, have mercy on me," naming him a second time as the Messiah through this proclamation of him as the Son of David. And Jesus stops and is still and responds, "Call him here." And that very same community that had been hushing him and dismissing him, they switch gears. "Wow, Bartimaeus, get up, he's calling you." And people step aside and make room for Bartimaeus to draw near to Jesus. The crowd in this gospel has my attention. They are key players. They are key players in dismissing Bartimaeus. And then when Jesus stops in response to Bartimaeus' cry for mercy, then some, maybe all, but likely some, shift and encourage him, saying, "Go for it, Bartimaeus. Jesus is calling for you." I have some empathy for the crowd here. They see what has always been true to them. They see a blind man begging on the side of the road. They've probably seen him there all their life. They don't see what Bartimaeus sees: the possibility of healing, of restoration of health, the possibility of wholeness. They experience Bartimaeus as someone who is a nuisance, who's disrupting the visit of Jesus in the town of Jericho. And Jesus hears the call for mercy, and he stops. He stops and draws near to respond to the person calling for mercy. And as he stops and responds to this man, that crowd shifts their response to encouragement and hope. While I was serving as an AmeriCorps volunteer, I worked in a school that was a private tuition-free school for children with severe emotional and psychological challenges. All of the children in my school came from South Central Los Angeles. Almost all of them had a family member who was affiliated with either the Bloods or the Crips gang. They experienced frequent trauma and violence in their neighborhoods. And in response to that trauma and violence, the kids in my school exhibited behaviors that caused them to be expelled from mainline schools. But the school where I worked offered these children support with wraparound services to the children and to their parents to support them not only academically, but also in learning to manage their emotional and psychological needs. The Ansley School here at St. Luke's offers similar support to the children who are coming to learn. And the children and the families at the Ansley School are experiencing homelessness, and that comes with its own challenges that require some wraparound support and extra care. These schools are amazing responses to kids who are on the margins. These kids who, like Bartimaeus, are being hushed and held back by the crowds, by forces outside of their control. Their needs have always been there, but we are just now hearing and recognizing their cries for mercy. We live this out on the micro level, on the personal level, in our own lives. There are probably many times in our routines and in the structures of our lives that we find ourselves hushing the familiar voice, the one crying out, the one seeking healing, and we choose for whatever reason not to respond, not to speak out and encourage that one who is suffering, who is oppressed. Bartimaeus sought and found healing in Jesus. And when his sight was restored, when he felt the power of God's love restoring him to health and wholeness, his response, it's the last 3 words in the gospel. His response was to join Jesus on the way, to become part of the work that brings others to healing and to wholeness. What would it take to shift our response from dismissive, from averting our eyes, towards our response being to become part of the support that moves others forwards towards living into the fullness of being? We make this shift by asking ourselves, is our response faithful? Is it pointing us and others towards God? Is our response grounded in hope or in fear? And is our response charitable? Does it care for others? We prayed this morning in our collect of the day that God may increase in us the gift of faith, hope, and charity. The way we choose to respond to one another matters. It can be what holds another down or lifts us all up together. We are not Jesus, so we can't offer that ultimate healing. But we can be more aware of when we as individuals and as a community stand in the way of healing, blocking the path to justice and wholeness and fullness of life. Faith, hope, and charity. This is how we grow more fully into the community of faith that God calls us to be. Amen.